In the 21st year of the Solsario calendar, the kingdom of Granwald is under siege. It is the last bastion of humanity, where the final survivors have gathered. Inside, soldiers cling to a faint hope, trying to defy their grim reality. But fear is a poison that spreads quickly through the ranks. As if the horde below wasn't enough, dragons descend from the blood-red sky. They unleash a torrent of fire upon the castle walls, blasting a hole straight through their final defense. The monsters pour in, and the lives of the defenders are snuffed out in an instant. A colossal beast toys with a soldier, a grim display of overwhelming power. For everyone trapped within these walls, an unavoidable fate is closing in. The battle rages on, a final, desperate struggle, until humanity's very last breath. Inside a makeshift infirmary, the wounded and dying are brought in one by one. But amidst the despair, a young healer works tirelessly, pouring his energy into every last soldier, vowing to save them all. An aide rushes in, warning him that the gates are about to fall. He begs the healer to escape, insisting his life is too valuable to risk. But the young man, Will, refuses to listen, enraged at the thought of abandoning them. He believes that as long as he can heal, humanity still has a chance. A painful memory surfaces, a promise made to someone he couldn't save. A dying man's final words echo in his mind. A heavy burden to carry. He's snapped back to reality as a voice cries out his name. A soldier runs in, desperately searching for Master Will. He's carrying the general, who is gravely wounded and barely conscious. They lay the man down, fearing the front line will collapse without him. But Will steps forward, his hands already glowing with power, vowing to save him. He declares that this is the very reason he has stayed behind. A powerful healing aura envelops the general as Will focuses his energy. The magic explodes outwards in a blinding flash, pushing everyone back. But this immense power comes at a terrible cost to his own arm. The power of the spell takes a heavy toll, his own arm starting to crumble under the pressure. As the light fades, the soldiers look on in awe at the scene before them. And slowly, the general's eyes begin to open. The men erupt in cheers as their leader sits up, saved from the brink of death. Will leans in, assuring him that with this power, humanity's victory is finally within reach. But the general's reaction is not one of gratitude. Instead, a cold, hard look fills his eyes. And without warning, he strikes Will across the face. He clenches his fist, angrily telling the boy that his actions were completely unnecessary. Stunned and confused, Will can only ask why he was attacked. The other soldiers cry out, confused by their leader's sudden violence. But the general, his eyes glowing with an eerie light, silences them with a roar. He draws his sword, his grip tightening around the hilt. As Will looks on, still processing the betrayal, in a flash, the general brings the blade down, pinning Will to the floor. He screams at the boy, asking if it's this healing arm that refuses to let him die. He questions how a healer could ever understand the despair of the front lines. Just when he thought his suffering was over, Will's magic dragged him back from the peace of death. He declares that everyone feels the same way. They don't want to fight anymore. The words hit Will like a physical blow, shattering his entire reality. The weary faces of the other soldiers seem to confirm the general's words. All around him, the wounded look not with hope but with utter exhaustion. Will can't accept it, asking if his desperate efforts to save them were all for nothing. All the blood, sweat, and tears he poured into this fight. The general sneers that he's done suffering just to satisfy Will's sense of purpose. He turns his back, declaring that humanity will perish anyway, and Will can fight alone. The cruel taunt lands, reminding Will that healers possess no power to attack. As the general walks away, Will cries out that without him, they're all doomed. But outside the walls, doom is already gathering its strength. And another devastating blast tears through their final sanctuary. The blast throws everyone back, leaving Will sitting alone in the dust. Nearby, the general lies crushed beneath the rubble, his last word a desperate plea to run. His face contorts in agony as his life is brutally extinguished. But Will raises his arm, a brilliant light erupting from his fist to block the falling debris. A look of fierce determination replaces the despair in his eyes. He finally understands the true horror his comrades faced on the front lines. He admits to himself that he only ever watched the fighting from the rear, and in a moment of pure rage, he curses the years he spent learning to heal, a path that began with a simple talent for mending the broken, and ended with him being honored as the world's greatest healer. He realizes with burning regret that he should have been fighting with his own two hands. His fist clenches around a piece of stone, a useless weapon against an impossible foe. But he stands his ground anyway, facing the colossal beast that has breached their walls. And with nothing but pure, unadulterated rage, he prepares for his final moments. A last, defiant stand against the monster that will surely devour him whole. But as his world fades to black, two orbs of light appear in the void. A single drop hits the surface of a calm blue expanse, sending ripples outward. And suddenly, Will's eyes snap wide open. He finds himself getting out of a bed, in a place he doesn't recognize. It's a peaceful room, bathed in sunlight, a world away from the war he just lost. His eyes fall upon a desk where a sealed letter and a picture frame sit. He recognizes it as an admissions guide, and a shocking realization begins to form. A cold sweat runs down his face as the impossible truth dawns on him. A memory surfaces, a specific, pivotal day from 5 years in the past, the very day he was set on the path to becoming the world's greatest healer. He remembers his final moments, the certainty of being killed by a dragon. He doesn't understand how this is possible, but he accepts his new reality. He realizes that his dying wish, born from pure rage and regret, has been granted. And with this second chance, he knows exactly what he needs to do. This time, he will enroll in the Schwartz Academia and master offensive magic. But there's one fundamental rule standing in his way. Healers cannot use offensive magic. It's a truth known to every mage, a barrier he is determined to shatter. But he has an ace up his sleeve, the memories and mastered healing arts from his past life. With this knowledge, he vows to fight on the front lines and save the world himself. His first step is to enroll in the prestigious Schwartz Academia, the world's best school for offensive magic. The academy is renowned for its superior education, capable of turning any student into a first-rate offensive mage. He even recalls a powerful figure from his past life who also graduated from Schwartz. However, the academy's methods are a closely guarded secret, only available to its students. He realizes the problem immediately. There's likely no precedent for a healer enrolling in an academy for attackers. He wonders if money could be the answer, as nobles are known to buy spots for their untalented children. But that's a dead end. He had a fortune as the kingdom's chief healer, but that was in another lifetime, and even if he started working now, he'd never make enough money in time for admission. His thoughts are interrupted by a familiar voice calling his name. A young woman with a warm smile steps into his room. Will is stunned into silence, realizing that in this timeline she's still alive. She asks if he's all right, and he quickly brushes it off, wishing his sister a good morning. The simple, happy exchange is a moment he thought he'd lost forever. But beneath his calm exterior, a new resolve is forged. He vows that this time, he will prevent the tragedy that befell her and save everyone he couldn't before. But then a sudden spark of inspiration hits him. He grabs his sister's hands, excitedly telling her he's figured something out. Without another word, he rushes out the door, promising to explain everything later. His plan involves the Magic Academy Alliance, the organization that governs all magical education. He recalls that the Alliance's chairman also served as the headmaster of Schwartz Academia. But at some point, the powerful headmaster simply stopped appearing at the Alliance. The reason for his absence lies hidden behind the gates of his private estate. Inside, the old man watches over a young woman who is gravely ill. She lies in bed, trapped in the grip of a terrible fever. The headmaster can only reach out a hand, helpless to ease her suffering. The headmaster of Schwartz Academia, Alnaram Goldgran, cradles his dying granddaughter Marie. He whispers an apology, another healer having failed to cure her mysterious illness. In the previous timeline, he had spent every waking moment by her bedside. But the healing magic of that era was completely powerless against her affliction, and in the end, she tragically passed away. But that was what happened in his previous life. This time, however, a figure appears at the window, offering to handle the situation. It's Will making a rather unorthodox entrance that catches the headmaster by surprise. The headmaster recognizes him immediately as Will, the scholarship student from Heilig, much to our boy's surprise. He explains that Will's talent for healing is famous throughout the Alliance, though he questions his habit of using windows as doors. Will smirks, admitting to himself that dying once has certainly made him bolder. He explains that in the future he remembers there was no time left for either of them, and with unwavering confidence he declares that he can cure her. The headmaster's eyes narrow with suspicion, questioning what the boy truly wants. But Will insists his motives can wait, begging for permission to start the treatment immediately. A bead of sweat rolls down his face, the pressure of the moment weighing on him. The two lock eyes in a silent, tense standoff. Finally, the headmaster relents, telling Will to prove his words. Will takes his place at Marie's bedside, preparing to use the skills from his past life. With a look of intense focus, he begins to channel his power. The headmaster watches with an intense stare, ready to strike at any mistake. But Will pushes through the pressure, closing his eyes to focus. He gently takes Marie's wrist, beginning the delicate procedure. A brilliant green light fills the room as he channels his healing magic. He knows his power is weaker in this younger body, but his knowledge remains intact. He recalls the specific formula needed to cure the Zora disease that afflicts her, confident he can pull it off even with his current abilities. A moment later, the young woman's eyes begin to flutter open. She looks up at him, the fever broken, and Will breathes a sigh of relief. He offers a confident smile, assuring her that she's finally safe. He leans in with a charming smile, advising her to take it easy for now. But his confident facade quickly crumbles into flustered embarrassment. The headmaster rushes to his granddaughter's side, asking if she's truly all right. With a radiant smile, Marie confirms she hasn't felt this good in years. Tears of overwhelming relief well up in the old man's eyes. Will watches the touching reunion from a distance, understanding the weight of this moment. The headmaster is overcome with gratitude, his long vigil finally over. Later, the two sit down to discuss the terms of Will's reward. The headmaster offers him anything he desires, and Will prepares to make his move. He begins by stating that when it comes to healing, he has nothing left to learn. He makes his one and only request, to be enrolled in Schwartz Academia. The headmaster is stunned, questioning why a gifted healer would want to learn offensive magic. But Will's resolve is absolute. He knows exactly what he's asking for. The old man sees something in the boy's eyes, a depth that belies his age. He wonders if his entire life's authority was meant for this very moment. And with a newfound sense of purpose, he agrees to make it happen. He officially approves Will's enrollment into the academy, sealing their unprecedented agreement with a handshake. Elsewhere, a man with long blue hair complains about the headmaster's sudden and outrageous decision. He smirks, wondering how a mere healer could possibly survive Schwartz's brutal curriculum. He scoffs at the very idea of a pampered healer like Will. But time marches on, and the day of the entrance ceremony arrives. Headmaster Goldgrand stands before the new class, ready to begin the year. This is Schwartz Academia, a boarding school specializing in offensive magic. It boasts vast training grounds, research facilities, and a massive library. Its graduates are some of the most influential figures in the kingdom. For any aspiring attacker, there is simply no better environment to learn. Will knows that as the first healer ever to enroll, countless difficulties await him. But the haunting memory of his past failure pushes him forward. He is certain that this is where he will finally change his fate. Sometime after enrollment, Will's first practical class begins. He watches with a nervous sweat, already feeling the immense pressure. An instructor with long blue hair orders him to begin the test. While another student effortlessly conjures a powerful fire spell, Will struggles, his intense focus yielding no results. His own attempt fizzles out into nothing but a puff of smoke. The instructor coldly informs him that he has failed yet again. He's then banished from class until he can destroy the target on his own. Will desperately asks for guidance, arguing he can't learn without being taught. But the man simply scoffs, claiming that teaching a healer is a complete waste of time. Will then asks to study in the library, but is told there are no books for healers. Nearby, another student watches the scene unfold with a malicious grin. He suddenly shoves Will aside with a blast of fire, telling him he's in the way. The unexpected attack sends our boy sprawling across the training grounds. The blonde student laughs, mocking Will for being too slow to even dodge. He declares that this is an academy for attackers, not for weaklings who can't defend themselves. In his mind, it's Will's own fault for getting hit in the first place. The instructor agrees with the bully, suggesting Will should have enrolled in a healing academy. The student continues to taunt him, saying he can go get comforted by other gentle healers. But on the ground, Will's expression is not one of defeat, but of simmering rage. Later that night, Will sits alone in the training grounds, letting out a heavy sigh. He admits to himself that there's no sign he can learn offensive magic at all. He closes his eyes, running through the fundamentals in his mind. He knew this would be a struggle, because healing and offensive magic draw from completely different sources of power. Mages convert the power of their spirit into mana through specific formulas. The nature of that mana is determined by the caster's state of mind. Attackers use active mana for destructive spells, while healers possess only passive mana. But he knows Schwartz has a secret method for training mages from nothing, and he'd hoped to use it to learn how to convert his passive mana into an active form. He realizes that both students and teachers alike look down on healers. But despite the hostility, he refuses to give up. He remembers another powerful mage who started with little mana and refined it at this very academy. Knowing he can't continue blindly, he considers sneaking into the library for answers. But a sudden voice from behind catches him completely off guard. He quickly turns, trying to play it cool as a figure approaches from the shadows. His eyes widen as he recognizes the person walking toward him. A woman in a pristine white uniform steps into the moonlight. Her sharp, intelligent eyes seem to pierce right through him. She stands before him with an air of authority, a sword resting at her hip. He utters a name he hasn't spoken in years. Veronica. A memory floods his mind of fighting alongside her in his past life. She was a first-class offensive mage, one of humanity's greatest hopes. And in the end, he was powerless to save her as she died in his arms. But the shock gives way to a nostalgic joy at seeing her alive once more. He recalls the power of her magic sword, a weapon that could cleave through any foe. But his trip down memory lane is cut short as she suddenly draws that very blade. She declares him a suspicious student, her eyes cold and wary. She demands to know if he's causing trouble or simply training. Realizing she's nothing like the bullies, Will frantically insists he's just training hard. She sheathes her blade, though her suspicious gaze doesn't waver. Still reeling from the shock of seeing her, Will cautiously confirms her identity. But she immediately rebukes him for addressing a teacher so informally. The word teacher catches him completely off guard, since in his past life, she was his peer. She explains that her immense talent allowed her to skip grades and become a professor this very year. Will quickly recovers, admitting that for a prodigy like her, such an achievement is no surprise. But beneath his smile, a new plan begins to form. He realizes that this genius of offensive magic might be the key to his own training. He boldly declares his desire to join her class, asking what he needs to do to be accepted as her student. Veronica explains that she isn't assigned to any classes yet. Instead, she's working as an assistant instructor to help students with their questions. But she admits with some confusion that no one ever seems to approach her. Will internally guesses it's because she's a bit too quick to draw her sword. But he sees this as a golden opportunity, asking if he can be the one to finally ask for her help. She readily agrees, confirming that it's her job after all. Will wastes no time, asking her what a healer must do to master offensive magic. Her eyes narrow as she admits she sensed something strange about his mana. She finally realizes he's the infamous new student everyone's been talking about. She confirms that the idea of a healer learning offensive magic is completely unheard of. Will explains that he's heard Schwartz has a secret method for refining active mana from nothing. He believes that with this technique, he too could learn to wield it, and Veronica confirms that such a method does exist. A spark of hope ignites in Will's eyes at her confirmation, but she quickly crushes that hope, stating that it would still be impossible for him. The problem, she explains, is that he already possesses far too much passive mana. Any active mana he creates would simply be overwhelmed and dissolved, rendering his offensive spells useless. As she walks away, Will's world crumbles, realizing there might be no known way for him to succeed. But his despair quickly turns to resolve. If a method doesn't exist, he'll just have to create one himself. He thanks her for the information, masking his renewed determination with a polite smile. But as he turns to leave, he knows this conversation is far from over. But she stops, admitting that while healers can't use offensive magic, there is in fact a way for one to become an offensive mage. She gestures to her iron sword, explaining its purpose is to cut down enemies. Then she points to a simple wooden bench nearby, stating that its purpose is for sitting. But she then lifts it with ease, suggesting it could also be used as a weapon, much to Will's surprise. She explains that just because something was made for one purpose doesn't mean it can't be used for another. The same logic, she says, applies to her own hands. She can use them to pat him gently on the cheek, a sudden gesture that leaves our boy completely flustered. Or she can use them to hurt him, as she demonstrates with a sharp poke to the cheek. Will tears up from the unexpected jab, though he insists he's fine. The point, she clarifies, is that anything can become a weapon if used correctly. And a shocking idea begins to form in Will's mind, using healing magic offensively. Veronica's subtle smile confirms he's on the right track. She admits the thought never crossed her mind, due to the innate differences between the two disciplines. Attackers and healers are simply wired differently, with no interest in each other's arts. But she senses that Will is an exception to this rule. His very presence here proves he's different, and she reveals his mana isn't that of a pure healer. He looks at his hand, realizing he never noticed the change, and wonders if his regression is the cause. She tells him he needs to recognize the power he already has, and to find the aggressive passion that lies dormant within him. If he can, she promises his healing magic will become a weapon to shatter his enemies. The next day, Will stands in the training grounds, mulling over Veronica's words. Her advice from the previous night echoes in his mind, a revolutionary concept. The examples she used were strange, but they opened his eyes to a new possibility. He wonders why she, unlike everyone else, showed no aversion to healers. His thoughts are interrupted as another student calls out, not even bothering to use his name. A new instructor announces one-on-one mock battles, informing Will he must participate. She coldly adds that his inability to fight is his own problem, and he brought this on himself. With a malicious smile, she announces that the pairings have already been decided, and to no one's surprise, she pits Will against the very student who attacked him, Ulpus. Will can only sigh at the obvious setup, as the instructor laughs in the background, but his eyes narrow with a flicker of determination. His opponent is Ulpus Omen, a pompous noble who is always surrounded by followers. Will recalls from class that the guy's skills are genuine, not just a product of his family name. Ulpus taunts him, mocking his healing magic and asking if he'll run home crying after the fight. Will forces a smile, though a vein of irritation pops on his head. He admits that while his past self might have ignored the taunts, this time it's really starting to get on his nerves. He raises his hand, telling the instructor he won't be forfeiting and is ready to test a new theory. He holds up a finger, clarifying that he has a proposal. Will admits he has no talent for offensive magic and that this is a waste of time. He then raises the stakes, vowing to quit the academy if he loses this fight. The instructor smirks, pleased with what she thinks is a sensible decision. But Will adds that if he wins, he must be allowed to attend regular classes. Ulpus laughs at the idea, mocking Will for needing a fantasy to face his fear. He sneers that it's more fun for him when there's hope to crush. The instructor cuts them off, dismissing Will's condition as an impossible hypothetical. She orders both students to take their positions on the training field. With a sharp downward motion of her arm, she officially begins the match. Ulpus wastes no time, gathering his mana with a smug look on his face. He unleashes his signature spell, conjuring a storm of magical blades. He proudly declares this is his knife creation magic, promising to skewer our boy. The golden daggers rain down on Will as Ulpus mocks the helpless healer. But Will remains perfectly still, closing his eyes and focusing his own power. A complex green magic circle forms between his hands, the familiar glow of healing magic. His eyes snap open, now burning with an intense emerald light. He then moves with impossible speed, weaving through the barrage of blades without a scratch. Ulpus can only stare in disbelief, his confident smirk completely gone. Will recalls the essence of his power, the ability to manipulate life itself, maximizing a target's own healing potential. But he realizes that healing isn't the only thing he can manipulate. Ulpus refuses to believe it was anything more than a lucky fluke. Green energy erupts from Will's body, forming sharp spikes all over his uniform. With a cold, determined look, he snatches one of the golden daggers from the air. Ulpus unleashes another volley, this time sending spinning discs of energy. But the rest of the daggers fall harmlessly to the ground at his feet. Will catches one of the discs with ease, a confident smirk on his face. His grip tightens around the hilt of the captured blade. With a taunting smile, he declares that he'll be borrowing this weapon, and a brilliant golden light begins to emanate from the blade in his hand. The other students can only stare in shock, questioning if they just witnessed offensive magic. But Will knows the truth. He didn't use offensive magic. He simply turned his healing into a weapon. Enraged by this turn of events, Ulpus prepares to retaliate. He roars that he was just holding back, summoning an even greater storm of blades. He unleashes the full barrage, refusing to accept defeat at the hands of a mere healer. But Will moves like a blur, deflecting every single blade with his captured dagger. The golden weapons shatter and fall harmlessly at his feet, leaving Ulpus stunned. Realizing that sheer numbers won't work, he begins to channel his power for a different kind of attack. He condenses his magic into a single massive blade, glowing with fiery energy. Will calmly observes the new threat, admitting to himself that his opponent is genuinely skilled. Ulpus adds a powerful rotation to his massive blade, launching the spinning weapon straight toward our boy. But Will simply raises a hand and stops the attack dead in its tracks. Ulpus can only stare in utter disbelief. Will grits his teeth, feeling the immense pressure of the spell. The bully's face contorts with rage and confusion, but Will calmly wonders if he should strengthen his physical enhancement even more. With a single swing, he shatters the massive blade against the ground. Ulpus watches his ultimate attack crumble into dust, unable to comprehend what just happened. Will suddenly appears behind him, dagger in hand, with a chilling promise to heal him after this is all over. With a cold glint in his eye, Will prepares to bring the dagger down. But before he can land the final blow, a massive wall of earth erupts from the ground. The force of the spell sends him leaping backward, leaving Ulpus sitting on the floor, utterly defeated. The instructor stands between them, her hand raised, having stopped the fight herself. She declares the match over, ordering them both to stand down immediately. Will lowers his weapon, his cold gaze still fixed on the humiliated bully. He then turns to the instructor, his demeanor changing instantly as he asks about their deal. Cornered by her own words, she grits her teeth and tells him to do as he pleases. Will beams, offering a cheerful thank you for her permission. With the battle won, Will turns his back on the defeated bully and the stunned instructor. He walks away, reflecting on the strange new sensation of his power. He's created his own style of offensive magic, one that worked far better than he ever imagined. And he knows he has Professor Veronica to thank for this incredible breakthrough. With this new path forward, he can finally become the offensive mage he needs to be. A new day dawns at Schwartz Academia, full of new possibilities. Meanwhile, the blue-haired instructor helps Ulpus to his feet, who tries to brush off his humiliating defeat. He casually mentions that he'd rather not bother his powerful father with every little problem. His eyes glow with a menacing light, making a veiled threat the instructor can't possibly ignore. The instructor nervously adjusts his glasses, assuring the young noble that he understands completely. He smirks, vowing he won't let a healer act so high and mighty. The next day, Will finally takes his seat in a proper class, ready to learn. He's determined to master every single aspect of offensive magic, but his excitement is cut short as the blue-haired instructor enters the room. The man's expression is as cold and unwelcoming as ever, clearly displeased to see Will among his students. He announces the start of their magic tool creation class. Will feels a sense of nostalgia, remembering a similar lesson from his past life. Today's project is to craft a simple but effective ice bomb. The instructor distributes the materials, ordering them to begin the assembly. He reflects that in his past life, he only ever crafted healing items. But he realizes that for magic tools, the materials are far more important than the user's mana. This gives him confidence that even he should be able to handle this class. He inspects the ingredients, a fragment from an ice golem's eye and powder from a flame tree. Following the instructions, he prepares to combine the two volatile components. But as he holds the crystal, he senses a dangerous instability in its energy. His eyes widen as he realizes what's about to happen. Just then, another student's physical enhancement spell goes haywire, firing across the classroom. The stray magic strikes the unstable materials, triggering a massive explosion of icy energy. The blast instantly freezes over, creating a dangerous wall of razor-sharp ice. Will looks on in shock, a cold sweat breaking out on his face. The instructor immediately rounds on the student responsible for the stray magic, demanding to know what he was doing. The boy tries to explain that the spell went off on its own before he could properly infuse his mana. But the instructor silences him, docking points from his grade without a second thought. Will watches the unfair exchange, realizing just how volatile this class can be. Nearby, Ulpus and his friends laugh at the other student's expense. The blonde noble gives Will a smug look, his golden eyes filled with contempt. Will can only glare back, his frustration with the academy's toxic environment growing. But he pushes it aside, steeling himself for the next lesson. The next class is on magical creatures, starting with a small salamander in a cage. The instructor begins the lesson on magical creatures, with a small salamander as the subject. He orders all the low-scoring students to the front row, a clear jab at Will. Will feels a bit uneasy being so close to the creature, and his instincts prove right as it suddenly unleashes a torrent of fire. But our boy came prepared, using a cooking pot as a makeshift shield. Without a second thought, the instructor confiscates his only means of defense. Will finally understands the game they're playing. They'll let him attend class, but they have no intention of actually teaching him. He's left to wonder what his next move should be. But then his attention is drawn to another student sitting nearby, who seems to be struggling with her own dark cloud of anxiety. He notices a young woman with pinkish brown hair, looking just as stressed as he feels. He sees that he isn't the only target of the academy's cruelty, as another student is attacked under the guise of an accident. The instructor then blames the victim for falling behind, docking his grade without a second thought. Later, the same student finds his belongings trashed outside his dorm room. To make matters worse, the dorm supervisor punishes him for the incident, denying him dinner. Back in his own room, Will reflects on the day's events. He collapses onto his bed, sighing at the constant hostility he faces from everyone. He knows he still has a mountain of challenges to overcome, but he refuses to let the constant harassment break his spirit, knowing he's making steady progress. Besides, for the first time in either of his lives, he fought with his own two hands and won. That single victory fuels his resolve to become a true offensive mage. Having finally acquired a textbook, he decides to review the day's lessons. But the next day, he finds himself sitting in a nearly empty classroom. He waits patiently, but the instructor is nowhere to be found. He notices the only other person there is the anxious girl from before, and a suspicion forms. Realizing there's no point in waiting, he decides to leave. But first, he approaches the other student who looks up in surprise. He asks with a friendly smile if she thinks the classroom was changed, and she nervously agrees. She bluntly admits that since he, the academy's outcast, was here, she figured it was a setup. With a gloomy aura, she confesses that she's in the same boat as him. She suggests that as fellow loner outcasts, they should try to get along. But Will is just genuinely happy to make a friend, offering his hand with a warm smile. Flustered by his sincerity, she nervously accepts his handshake. She then properly introduces herself as Erica Glenn. Will reflects that Erica is his first real friend here, as she tries to rationalize his outcast status. She bluntly states that everyone believes healers are weaklings, a prejudice that hits Will hard. He tries to lighten the mood, joking that he's an offensive mage who still has no friends either. But he realizes the discrimination against healers runs far deeper than he ever imagined. In his past life, his immense talent meant he never had to experience this kind of treatment. He understands that to succeed here, he'll have to fight against that prejudice every step of the way. Erica looks at him, a bit taken aback by his friendly demeanor. She asks him directly why a healer like him would ever come to Schwartz. Will pauses for a moment, the question hitting close to home. He knows that being born a healer is no excuse to give up on his true goal, but he just smiles, saying he has his reasons before turning the question back on her. Erica explains that she comes from a small noble family in the provinces, but with no male heir, her parents worried their family line would simply die out. She remembers overhearing their anxious conversations as a young, lonely child. So they decided that if she could become a powerful offensive mage, she could lead the family herself. Will listens intently, realizing that graduating from this academy is her only path forward. She confesses that with almost no talent for offensive magic, she's become a loner. But she suddenly brightens up, realizing she's finally made a friend. She happily declares that with an even bigger outcast like him around, her own bad grades won't seem so bad. She then offers to help him with anything he doesn't understand, a genuinely kind gesture. But Will just smiles, telling her that things might not go the way she expects. He then turns on his heel, determined to find the real classroom. Erica quickly follows, rushing to catch up as they leave the empty room behind. After a short search, Will stops before another door, confident he's found it. But as they enter, the blue-haired instructor immediately calls them out for being late. While Erica stammers an apology, Will calmly explains they were in the wrong room, ignoring the mocking laughter from the other students. But the instructor cuts her off, refusing to hear any excuses. Instead, he turns his attention to Will with a malicious smile, challenging him to solve the complex magical formula on the board. Erica immediately protests, pointing out how unfair the demand is. But Will simply stares back, his expression calm and unwavering. The instructor lays out the terms. Get it right and he's forgiven, but get it wrong and his grade suffers. Ulpis watches from the back, eagerly anticipating Will's public humiliation. Without a word, Will steps forward and takes the piece of chalk. He calmly approaches the board, ready to face the challenge head-on. Erica looks on in disbelief, unable to comprehend his confidence. Ulpis can only watch in disbelief, convinced this is just a pointless struggle. But Will's hand moves with an unnatural confidence, the chalk glowing with power. In moments, he completes the complex formula, a perfect magic circle now shining on the board. He turns back to the instructor with a smug smile, asking if his answer is acceptable. The instructor leans in, his eyes wide with shock as he examines the flawless solution. A cold sweat runs down his face, unable to find a single error in the boy's work. Through gritted teeth, he admits the answer is correct, as Ulpis stares in utter disbelief. Will calmly returns to his seat, leaving a stunned Erica to wonder what just happened. She asks him how he could possibly know the answer, but Will just offers a knowing smile. As other students turn to stare, they begin to realize there's more to this healer than they thought. After class, Erica asks how he could have possibly solved such a complex formula. He calmly explains that he just studied ahead using the textbook. She's in disbelief, asking if he really read the advanced textbook all by himself. He remembers reading it for the first time just last night, impressed by its quality. It covers a vast range of knowledge, from the basics to advanced applications. And with the knowledge from his past life, he was able to grasp the concepts with ease. He even admits he stayed up late studying simply because he found it so fun. Erica panics, admitting she thought he was a fellow dropout, not some kind of genius. She grabs him, worried she's now at the bottom of the class and begging him not to leave her behind. But Will just smiles, reassuring her that he'll help her with anything she doesn't understand. He reminds her that they're friends now, a simple statement that means the world to her. Overwhelmed with emotion, Erica can only offer a tearful thank you. But Will's thoughts are far more calculated. He knows having an ally will be useful for his mission. He asks for a favor in return, as their next lesson is the dreaded basic offensive magic class. She remembers this is the very class he was banished from for his repeated failures. Will admits that despite his victory over Ulpis, he still can't use conventional offensive magic. But a determined glint in his eye reveals that he has a new plan in mind. And for this plan to work, he's going to need Erica's help. Later, the students gather in the training grounds for their practical lesson. Will stands among them, ready to face the challenge that once defeated him. He reflects on the two types of offensive magic, basic and unique. Basic magic is universal, constructed from formulas that anyone can learn, while unique magic is a personal style, like the blade creation used by Ulpis. The Academy's curriculum is split between learning the basics and refining one's unique skills. Will knows he can pass the unique magic classes with his new offensive healing style. But the basic magic class is a wall he can't seem to climb on his own. The instructor taunts him, saying that practicals are a different beast and failure is inevitable. Will can only listen, knowing the man is right about the rules. The assignment is the same as before. Conjure a simple fireball and hit the target. And the instructor makes it clear that without this skill, Will's time at the academy is over. The instructor recalls seeing Will's unique application of healing magic in the mock battle, acknowledging that it can be used to enhance physical abilities. But he dismisses it, stating that Will still can't use conventional offensive magic. He tells the incompetent healer to hurry up and get out of his class. But the instructor is taken aback by the boy's sudden confident smirk. His eyes widen in shock as he realizes what's happening, because in Will's hand, a perfect fireball suddenly ignites. Will offers a confident smile, relieved that his little trick went unnoticed. His plan began earlier, back in the empty classroom with Erica. He had asked her to create a fireball using her own basic magic. He then infused her magic into the severed tail of a salamander. By constantly healing the appendage, he could hold the burning magic in his hand. Erica worried about the pain, but Will assured her his healing made it a non-issue. She could only stare in awe, wondering just who this boy really was. The final step was to activate the tail's flame sac with his own magic, making it look like a real spell. Back in the present, he hurls the disguised magic toward the target. It strikes with a fiery explosion, perfectly mimicking a real fireball. Will turns to the stunned instructor, asking if that was good enough. The man can't believe his eyes, wondering if the healer somehow learned offensive magic. Through gritted teeth, he tells Will that he passes, and our boy offers a polite thank you. Erica and the other students can only stare in utter disbelief. Ulpus, however, is seething with pure, unadulterated rage. Later, he corners the blue-haired instructor, demanding to know what just happened. He questions how a healer could suddenly use offensive magic, but quickly decides he doesn't care about the reason. For him, the simple fact that a healer defied him is unbearable, and he threatens to involve his powerful father. The instructor's face pales, knowing just how serious that threat is. Ulpus orders him to use any method necessary to get Will out of his sight. As the young noble leaves, the instructor is left to ponder his dangerous ultimatum. He knows that acting outside the rules is risky, and he remembers how hard he worked to earn his position. But in the end, his own ambition wins out, and he decides to protect his job no matter the cost. He refuses to let some 15-year-old healer ruin the life he's built. With a menacing glint in his eye, he decides to take matters into his own hands. The next day, he summons Will to an empty courtyard, and our boy cautiously asks what this is all about. The instructor notes that Will seems to be feeling confident lately, but quickly clarifies it's not a compliment. He then brings up the classes Will missed, demanding to know how he plans to make up for them. Will bites back a retort, knowing full well whose fault that was. He calmly explains that he studied with a classmate and covered the material on his own, but the instructor dismisses his excuse, stating that makeup lessons are required for any absence. And according to the rules, the instructor in charge decides the content of that lesson, announcing with a malicious grin that Will have a mock battle against him. Will can only stare, processing the absurd demand for a battle between teacher and student. The instructor offers a condescending handicap, promising to pass Will if he can land just a single hit. He taunts the boy, saying he can't possibly refuse such generous terms. The man smirks, confident that Will's attacks will never even reach him. He vows to beat the boy into submission until he finally understands the difference in their power. But to his surprise, Will calmly accepts the challenge, agreeing to the fight. The instructor's eyes gleam with a malicious light, pleased that his prey has taken the bait. Without another word, he unleashes his power, a golden aura erupting from a magic circle on the ground. Will recognizes this magic, remembering the earth wall that stopped his fight with Ulpus. And just as he recalls, the very ground beneath his feet begins to tremble and rise. A massive pillar of earth erupts with incredible speed, forcing Will to leap back in surprise. He barely avoids another strike, the ground shattering where he just stood. The sheer power of the attack catches him completely off guard. The instructor mocks him from a distance, asking why he's only dodging. Will realizes this magic is on a completely different level than Ulpus's. The instructor's ability to manipulate the existing ground makes his attacks incredibly fast. But Will's enhanced reflexes allow him to weave through the barrage, his body moving like a blur across the courtyard. He knows that if he wants to win, he'll have to find a way to close the distance. The instructor channels his power, preparing another assault. But Will continues his advance, weaving through the deadly pillars. A massive wall of earth suddenly shoots up from the ground, as the instructor smirks, confident in his impenetrable defense. But Will uses the wall as a launch pad, leaping over it with a borrowed sword. His eyes glow with power as he brings the blade down for a decisive strike. But his attack is blocked by a figure made of solid rock. The blade barely scratches the surface. Its defense is too strong. The creature retaliates, sending a wave of sharp spikes across the ground. The instructor reveals his earth armor, mocking Will's pathetic strength. The instructor scoffs, dismissing Will's power as a cheap imitation of true offensive magic. He finds the very idea of a healer trying to become an attacker completely laughable. But Will recalls his past life, and the deep understanding of the human body he gained through healing. He knows that the body has natural limiters to prevent it from tearing itself apart with its own power. The instructor cuts him off, accusing the boy of trying to lecture his way out of a fight he can't win. Will knows that if he were to remove those limiters to output more power, his body would be torn to shreds. But as a healer, he can simply repair the damage as it happens. The instructor can only stare, a bead of sweat rolling down his face at the boy's insane logic. Will steps forward, admitting the pain is real but temporary, as the instructor dismisses his plan as foolish. With a manic grin, Will unleashes his full power, ready to test his theory on the man's ironclad defense. The instructor can only watch in horror as the boy's power surges. In a flash of green light, Will closes the distance and shatters the man's impenetrable defense with a single devastating punch. He stands over the fallen instructor, reminding him that a teacher should never decide a student's limits. He reflects on Veronica's advice, realizing the most foolish thing is to believe something is impossible. With this new power, he knows he can become so much stronger, but his victory is cut short by a sudden tremor from behind. He turns just in time to see the ground erupting once more. The instructor slowly rises to his feet, his pride clearly wounded. And with a cold, menacing glare, he decides this lesson is far from over. Will clenches his fist, surprised by the man's resilience. He's forced to dodge another massive earth spike that erupts from the ground. The instructor stands over him, his pride clearly wounded. With a menacing glint in his eye, he adjusts his glasses, his rage palpable. But Will gets to his feet, calmly reminding the man about their little deal. The instructor roars back that with no witnesses, their agreement means nothing. He slams his hand down, refusing to accept the humiliation of being struck by a healer, and unleashes a massive wave of crystalline spikes, determined to end this now. But Will just smirks, revealing that his limiter release has more than one application, as green energy begins to swirl around his feet, enhancing his speed. He moves like a blur, narrowly avoiding the instructor's relentless assault. The man can't believe his eyes, stunned by the boy's impossible speed. He realizes with dawning horror that his earth armor won't form in time to block the attack. But then a strange calm seems to wash over the instructor. His eyes snap open, now glowing with a strange purple light. Suddenly, Will's punch stops just short of his face, his movement frozen in place. The instructor watches as the fist inches forward with agonizing slowness. He realizes that time itself seems to be slowing down around him. The man can only beg for it to stop, trapped in a moment of excruciating pain. Because in this slowed time, the agony of the single blow is stretched out into an eternity. The impact is magnified, making the single blow feel infinitely worse. He's trapped in a prison of his own senses, unable to escape or even scream. His mind can only beg for the torment to finally end. And just as suddenly, time snaps back to normal, sending him flying across the courtyard. He hits the ground hard, the prolonged agony ending in an instant. Will stands over him with a cheerful smile, a ball of healing magic in his hands. The instructor demands an explanation, and Will is more than happy to oblige. He reveals that at the moment of impact, he cast a sensory enhancement spell on him. It's a healing art meant to restore sight or hearing, but Will has been using it to sharpen his own reflexes. By overloading the instructor's senses, he made a single second of pain feel like an eternity. Will reminds the instructor that he now knows firsthand just how painful that experience can be. He then asks with a cheerful smile if he's finally passed the makeup lesson. But before the man can answer, Will grabs him with another request. He admits that changing people's prejudice against healers is difficult, but if the instructor gets in his way again, he'll make sure the lesson is far more painful. The terrified instructor can only agree, realizing he just wants to be left alone. With the threat delivered, Will's cheerful demeanor returns as he asks for the man's cooperation. And just like that, Will's life at the academy begins to change. The instructor walks away, completely shaken by the encounter and wondering what kind of monster Will truly is. He always believed healers were weaklings who should simply obey offensive mages, but now he's not so sure. He realizes that Will possesses not only high combat ability, but a will so strong it borders on killing intent. As he walks away, Ulpus emerges from the shadows, asking if the makeup lesson is over. He gloats that Will must now be one step closer to expulsion, but the instructor suddenly snaps, roaring at him to be quiet. He grabs the young noble, his eyes glowing with rage as he warns him to stay away from Will. He insists it's for Ulpus's own good, and that it's a grave mistake to see Will as a mere healer. But Ulpus tries to pull rank, reminding the man just who his father is. The threat, however, has lost its power, and the instructor calmly tells him to go right ahead. He turns his back, adding that if his father is so powerful, he should just get Will expelled himself. The instructor warns that a monster like Will is more likely to turn on them than be controlled. With that chilling thought, he leaves the young noble to stew in his own frustration. Ulpus can only lash out, slamming his fist against a nearby pillar. He curses the healer who has so thoroughly dismantled his pride. A few days later, life at the academy has found a new, calmer rhythm. Will stretches after a long day of classes, finally able to study in peace. He notes that the instructor's warning seems to have worked, as Ulpus now only glares from a distance. But even with the bullies off his back, Will knows this is far from enough. To change the future, he remembers, he needs to become exponentially stronger. He reflects that while his physical enhancement is a good start, it's still just brute force, and he needs to refine it into a true weapon. He knows his sensory enhancement is a powerful tool for intimidation, but it's a far cry from true offensive magic. So he seeks out the one person who might have some answers. The prodigy of offensive magic herself, Professor Veronica. He lays out his thoughts, asking for her opinion on his progress. But before she answers, she has something else she wants to say. Will waits, unsure of what to expect from the stoic professor. To his surprise, she offers a rare smile, congratulating him on a job well done. She reveals that his progress has become a major topic of discussion among the other teachers. Though she admits that most of them are not exactly thrilled about his success. He asks if she's been hiding her involvement, but she simply says she doesn't talk to the others enough for it to come up. Will realizes that even among the teachers, Veronica is a complete outcast. But he's actually relieved since it means her reputation won't suffer for helping him. She dismisses his concern, adding that she's the one who should be grateful. She explains that a normal healer would never have even considered her aggressive theory. And with a sudden flash, she draws her own blade, admitting she was curious to see what a true fighting healer would look like. Will can only stare in shock, asking what she's doing. She tells him that if he wants advice, she needs to see his current level for herself. He tries to protest, but she cuts him off, reminding him that there are no timeouts on a real battlefield. And without another word, she lunges forward with blinding speed. Will is caught completely off guard, barely able to react to her sudden assault. He manages to block her glowing blade just in time, the force of the impact staggering him. He grits his teeth, struggling to hold his ground against her overwhelming strength. The two exchange a flurry of blows, a blur of steel and magic filling the courtyard. Will realizes that even with his enhanced reaction speed, he's barely able to keep up. He understands that Veronica isn't just fast. Her movements are refined for a continuous, relentless assault. He knows that simply forcing his body to move faster has its limits. He decides he needs to use a burst of speed she hasn't seen yet. A desperate gamble to catch the prodigy completely off guard. With a surge of golden energy, he launches himself into the air for an acrobatic strike. But Veronica's eyes widen, a flicker of genuine surprise in her gaze. She tightens her grip on her magic sword, its power flaring to life. And with a single fluid motion, she shatters his attack completely. Will can only watch as his borrowed blade is reduced to fragments. The tip of his sword clatters uselessly against the stone courtyard. He can only offer a nervous laugh, holding the broken hilt in his hand. With the exchange over, Veronica calmly sheathes her weapon. She admits she's surprised he forced her to draw her magic sword. She praises his skill, noting he's already at the top of his class, but Will knows it's not enough. Veronica smiles, pleased by his ambition, and asks if he's ready to move beyond simple physical enhancement. Will stares at the broken hilt, admitting that simply removing his body's limiters isn't enough. He tells Veronica he's been trying to find new applications for his healing magic, but he's hit a wall. She suggests that what he's lacking is real combat experience, where true innovation is born. She asks if he learned anything from their spar, a memory of her intense focus flashing in his mind. Will asks if they should continue their mock battles, but she reveals a monster subjugation training is coming up soon. The news shocks him as he remembers this very event from his past life, a joint training exercise between 3 academies. The first is his own Schwartz Academia, the school for offensive mages. The second is Heilig Academia, the school for healers where he once studied. And the third is the Silbern Swordsmanship Academy, for masters of the blade. Students from all 3 schools form parties to take on real subjugation requests, an event Will remembers skipping in his past life. He vows that this time, he will defeat the monsters and change humanity's grim fate. And this joint training will be his very first real monster subjugation. But Veronica is quick to temper his excitement with a dose of reality. She explains that to even participate, he must first pass a selection exam. Elsewhere, a rumor circulates about a new prodigy among the first-year students. As a burly man with a fur-collared coat sits on a bench, observing from a distance, a woman with blue hair stands before him, telling someone to aim for first place in the exam. The memory of the monsters that destroyed his world fuels Will's determination. He knows this is his first real step toward becoming a true warrior. He asks what the exam entails, and she reveals that the candidates will be forced to fight each other. She explains that at Schwartz, only the strongest few are ever selected. Will reflects on this aggressive style, a stark contrast to his old academy. The memory of Heilig brings a brief thought of his mentor from his past life. Veronica warns him that a new prodigy is rumored to have already surpassed some teachers. Will asks if she's ever met this mysterious new student. She explains the prodigy has another mentor, though Will suspects her reputation is also a factor. But she promises to help him with his own training nonetheless. He's overjoyed, thanking her for the much-needed support. The day of the exam arrives, and Will makes his way to a massive arena. He steps onto the field, ready to face the challenge head-on. He steels his resolve, knowing he's prepared as much as he possibly can for this test. But his thoughts are interrupted by a familiar, towering figure approaching from behind. It's the headmaster, Alniram Goldgran, who has come to see him off. The old man expresses his gratitude once more, and Will is happy to hear that Marie is doing well. Goldgran apologizes for not being able to help him more, knowing how difficult his time at the academy must have been. But Will just smiles, assuring him that while it was a struggle at first, he's doing just fine now. He even declares his intention to take first place, a statement that fills the headmaster with pride. But from a distance, another figure watches their exchange with pure contempt. He scoffs at the very idea of this healer aiming for the top spot. The field training supervisor, Bode, decides he'll have to teach these arrogant brats a lesson. Will's eyes narrow, recognizing the man from his past life. He remembers him as Bode the Purple Lightning, a hero from the Great War. But as Bode grabs him, Will recalls that his memories of the man are far from pleasant. The supervisor declares that combat is a world of talent, where effort means little. He sneers that being a healer means Will has absolutely no chance of winning. But Will simply glares back, completely unfazed by the man's hostility. The headmaster tries to intervene, but Bode insists this is just his way of educating. He then points to another student, declaring that this is Will's true opponent. A tall figure with long silver hair stands a short distance away. He turns, his piercing blue eyes identifying him as the prodigy Sirius Blue Note. Will's eyes narrow, his focus fixed on the new challenger. Bode confirms that this is the prodigy, Sirius Blue Note. And Will knows this is the opponent he must defeat to reach first place. The two rivals lock eyes, a silent challenge passing between them. The headmaster cuts in, noting their passion but reminding them it's time to begin. He ushers the students toward the massive gates of the arena. Inside, countless students are already gathered, ready for the exam to start. Will takes his place among the crowd, spotting a few familiar faces. He's surprised to see Erica is also participating, who explains her allowance is on the line. Nearby, Ulpus and his cronies glare at him from a distance. Will can't help but feel a bit overwhelmed by the sheer number of competitors. Headmaster Goldgran addresses the crowd, encouraging them to unleash their full fighting spirit. He explains the rules of the preliminary round, a timed survival battle where only the last one standing will advance. Will notes how crowded the arena is, with the prodigy Sirius standing calmly nearby. But the headmaster assures them that space won't be an issue. As he slams his staff down, unleashing a massive wave of spatial magic, the very ground beneath their feet transforms into a swirling, starry expanse. He raises his staff, a powerful artifact glowing with immense energy, and with a final incantation, he teleports all the students to the exam grounds. Will finds himself standing alone in a dense, unfamiliar forest. He recognizes the familiar forest behind the academy. The headmaster's voice echoes through the trees, explaining that everyone has been scattered. While some, like Erica, find themselves in immediate danger, others, like the prodigy Sirius, remain completely unfazed. Will can only marvel at the sheer power of the headmaster's magic. And with a final declaration, the selection exam officially begins. Will's first move is to get a better lay of the land, quickly scaling a nearby tree to get a vantage point. He then uses his healing magic to conceal his presence, minimizing his life force. Now hidden, he can observe the battlefield without being detected. From his perch, he watches a chaotic battle unfold between other students. One student commands a powerful earth golem to attack his rivals, while another brings down a massive magical hammer, vowing to crush her opponent. The clash of different spells fills the clearing as the students fight for survival. But Will sees this not as a threat, but as a perfect chance to observe new forms of magic. A greedy smile spreads across his face, already wanting to make their powers his own. A moment later, the battle is over, with two students lying defeated on the ground. The golem's master celebrates his victory, boasting about his overwhelming strength, but a voice from behind congratulates him on the impressive display. As Will's hand clamps down on the back of his head, he unleashes a new technique, severing the boy's consciousness with a flash of light. The student's eyes roll back into his head, his mind going completely blank. And with a puff of smoke, he collapses to the ground, completely neutralized. It's a new application of his healing magic, manipulating life force to induce a blackout. While it requires close contact, it's the perfect way to take down opponents without causing any real harm. He's just glad the new skill he developed with Professor Veronica actually worked. But his celebration is cut short as he senses another presence nearby. He leaps back just as a volley of swords erupts from the ground where he stood. A massive blade then appears before him, a magic style he recognizes all too well. Will can only let out a weary sigh, already knowing who's behind this ambush. It's Ulpus and his cronies, a group that just can't seem to take a hint. The blonde noble plays innocent, claiming he's just trying his best to pass the exam. But his true intentions are revealed as all three of them begin to gather their magic. Ulpus unleashes his signature knife creation magic once again, but this time, his friends add their own skills to the mix, one enchanting a blade with poison, while the other uses replication magic to multiply the deadly poisoned weapons. He gloats that no matter how fast Will is, he can't possibly dodge this many poisoned blades. A storm of purple daggers rains down on our boy, a seemingly impossible barrage to avoid. Will knows he could simply heal the poison, but dodging this many attacks would be a challenge, so he decides on a different approach, gathering his own power to face the threat head-on. But instead of dodging, Will stomps his foot and a massive shape erupts from the ground. It's the very same earth golem from before, now acting as his personal shield. Ulpus can only stare in disbelief, demanding to know what's happening. Will stands behind his new ally with a confident smirk, having turned their own trap against them. He recalls that while healing magic only works on living things, this golem is powered by its caster's blood. By infusing it with his own life force, he can seize control of the magical creature. And with a new master at the helm, the golem charges straight for its former allies. It lands a devastating blow on one of the cronies, sending him flying. The other is quickly neutralized, slammed into the ground without a chance to fight back. Ulpus turns tail and runs, screaming at his friends for being so easily defeated. But Will suddenly appears before the fleeing noble, cutting off his escape. He clamps a hand over the bully's face, preparing his final move. With a cheerful smile, he puts the last of the trio to sleep. Elsewhere in the forest, another battle rages on between different students. Will watches from above, realizing the golem is a perfect way to cover his own weaknesses in ranged combat. But his observation is cut short by a sudden shift in the air. A massive tornado of wind magic tears through the forest, catching our boy completely by surprise. The sheer scale of the spell is unlike anything he's seen so far. He's forced to leap away as the vortex rips through his hiding spot. The spell has carved a perfectly straight path of destruction right through the forest. In its wake, defeated students and even a golem lie scattered on the ground. Will stands in the middle of the devastation, stunned by the overwhelming power. He looks up to see a single figure standing at the end of the path. It's the prodigy, Sirius, and Will knows that taking him down will be no easy task. He considers testing his own power right here and now, but decides against it, knowing this isn't the time for a reckless fight. Just then, the headmaster's voice announces that the preliminaries are over, with only 4 students left standing. A teleportation circle glows at Will's feet as he's told to rest up for the main event. He takes one last look at his rival before being whisked away from the battlefield. The prodigy gives one last cold look, his power still lingering in the air. But Will just smirks back, equally eager for their inevitable showdown. The path of destruction left by Sirius is a testament to his immense power. Back in his room, Will spends the rest of the day studying, preparing himself for the final battle that awaits him tomorrow. Elsewhere, Ulpus's friends try to talk some sense into him. They point out that Will is genuinely strong and even healed them after their defeat. But Ulpus explodes in a rage, declaring that his family's pride won't allow him to be humiliated by a mere healer. He worries about the shame this would bring if his powerful father ever found out. His friends can only listen in nervous silence, caught in the middle of his wounded pride. But his friends have finally had enough telling him they're done getting hurt for his sake. And with that, they turn their backs on him, leaving the fuming noble all alone. Ulpus seethes, deciding that if magic won't work, he'll find another way to eliminate his rival. Meanwhile, Will is back in his room, completely unaware of the new plot against him. His studies are interrupted by a knock at his door. He stands, wondering who could possibly be visiting him at this hour. A bad feeling creeps in as he cautiously peeks outside. It's Ulpus, standing there with a disturbingly cheerful smile on his face. Will immediately cuts to the chase, asking what the bully is scheming this time. Ulpus drops the friendly act, admitting he's been trying to get Will kicked out of the academy from the very beginning. He admits he's tried a few different schemes, but Will remains completely unfazed. Ulpus decides he's done being subtle and will just say what he means. With a surge of power, he roars at Will to leave the academy for good. Will calmly asks why he's so antagonistic, but Ulpus scoffs that he needs no reason to look down on healers. He reveals that in his own family, healers are cast out just like his weak, hopeless older brother. A painful memory surfaces of his brother being mocked, but simply laughing it off. A younger Ulpus watched from the shadows, convinced that a proud mage and a pathetic healer are worlds apart. Will listens, realizing this is the deep-rooted prejudice of a prestigious noble family. Ulpus gestures to the door, telling him that this is no place for a healer. But Will asks if he really expects him to quit, as Ulpus vows to make him say the words himself. With a malicious smile, Ulpus brings up the one person Will cares about most. Will can only stare, not understanding where this is going. The noble reveals he had his servants investigate Will's past, showing an image of his sister, and makes a veiled threat, leaving our boy to imagine what might happen to her. Ulpus asks if he's made up his mind, and Will confirms that he has. But before the bully can finish his sentence, Will grabs him by the throat and sends him flying back with a single powerful blow. He then pins the stunned noble to the floor, twisting his arm back. Ulpus cries out, begging him to stop before his arm breaks, but Will just glares back, coldly reminding him that he's already made his decision. Ulpus's face contorts in agony as he lies pinned to the floor. He tries to let out a defiant laugh, but it comes out as a pained gasp. Through gritted teeth, he vows that his father and the academy will make Will pay for this. But Will calmly reveals he's already healed the arm, a green light glowing around his hand. The noble can only stare in utter confusion, not understanding what's happening. But his confusion turns back to terror as a sharp pain shoots through his arm once more, because Will has just broken it all over again. He then promises to heal it again, a chilling cycle of pain and recovery, and then break it once more, forcing the terrified bully to finally beg for mercy. But Will just smiles, explaining that while he can take the abuse, threatening his sister crossed a line he will not ignore. He explains that to make the lesson stick, he needs to completely break the bully's spirit. Ulpus can only stare in terror, wondering what kind of monster he's provoked. He finally understands that this is a demon wearing a healer's skin, a person he must never cross again. Because if he does, he knows he'll suffer a fate far worse than death. With the lesson taught, Will calmly bids the terrified noble good night. He gives one last cheerful reminder of their new agreement, leaving Ulpus completely traumatized. Back in his room, Will stretches, admitting that the confrontation was surprisingly refreshing. With that settled, he turns his focus to the main event, which is set to begin tomorrow. The next day, Headmaster Goldgrand takes his seat, ready for the final matches to begin. Nearby, the supervisor Bode and the prodigy Sirius watch with an air of cold confidence. Will is surprised to see that one of the other finalists is none other than his new friend, Erica. She looks incredibly nervous, clearly not expecting to have made it this far. Erica explains she just used flame walls to hide, a purely defensive strategy that Will finds rather unusual for an attacker. He wonders if a strategy based on running away can really work in a one-on-one tournament. She asks if he'll go easy on her since they're friends, but Will bluntly refuses. But her mood shifts instantly as she declares she'll fight with everything she has for a better evaluation. With both students ready, the first match of the final tournament officially begins. Erica gathers her power, her hands igniting with a determined look in her eyes. She unleashes a massive torrent of flames, sending it hurtling straight toward Will. But our boy meets the attack head-on, shattering the fireball with a single punch. He notes that her standard flame magic is weak enough for his healing to easily counter. He prepares to simply brush off the attack and move on. But as the flames surround him, he realizes something is very wrong. This is no ordinary fire, and a look of shock crosses his face. Erica declares she's not finished yet, unleashing another wave of fire. Will is forced to dodge, the flames now a genuine threat. He looks down to see the fire still clinging to his arm, refusing to go out. He realizes this is her unique magic, flames with abnormal persistence. A memory surfaces of his salamander tail trick, and he understands her magic was the key. He finally sees how her defensive strategy in the prelims was so effective. He realizes her unique magic is just as persistent as her personality. The crowd roars with excitement, cheering for Erica to take down the healer. For the first time, she wonders if she might actually be able to win this fight. With a surge of confidence, she unleashes her power, telling Will to surrender now. But Will calmly gathers his healing magic, confident he can extinguish her flames. She sends another massive wave of fire hurtling across the arena. But instead of dodging, Will simply reaches out and catches the flames in his hand. He then turns her own power against her, deciding to use it for an attack of his own. Erica can only stare in disbelief as he forms her magic into a fiery fist. With a confident smirk, Will lunges forward, ready to end this with her own power. Erica can only stare in terror, her confidence completely shattered. And just before the fiery fist can land, she screams out her surrender. The match ends, leaving her sitting on the ground, completely drained. The announcer declares Will the winner of the first match. But our boy notes that even in victory, the crowd still boos the healer. The audience then turns on Erica, berating her for forfeiting so easily against him. She can only cower in fear, apologizing for her performance. But Will steps forward, offering a hand to his defeated friend. He reassures her that she fought well, healing her hand as he tells her she still has a chance to pass. Erica looks up, completely taken aback by his unexpected kindness. But her defeat is interrupted by the supervisor, Bode, who grabs her from behind, roaring his disapproval. Will's eyes narrow as he watches the man terrorize his friend. Bode leans in with a cruel smirk, telling Erica to think about what she's done. He points to Will, declaring that all healers are worthless trash. And by losing to one, she's proven herself to be even lower than that. With his eyes glowing, he orders the terrified girl to get out, declaring that she has failed. But Will finally steps in, questioning if that's any way for a teacher to speak to a student. Bode just laughs it off, claiming his verbal abuse is just a form of tough love. Will takes a step back, creating distance between them. The supervisor declares that with this level of weakness, only one person will be passing this year. He tells Will that he's simply in the way, but the prodigy Sirius suddenly appears, telling Will to speak his mind. Will asks if he agrees with the supervisor's harsh assessment. Sirius admits that strength is everything, and that Bode is right because he is strong. Will just scratches his head, a thoughtful smile on his face. But the prodigy adds that he doesn't believe Will is weak either. He simply states his desire to be the one who is proven right. The silent challenge hangs in the air, and Will's expression hardens. A memory surfaces of the prodigy, Sirius Blue Note, and his immense power. Will recalls hearing of a terrifyingly powerful mage on the northern front in his past life. He remembers the vortex of wind that kept all challengers at bay, leaving a trail of defeated students in its wake. This was the power that earned Sirius Blue Note his spot in the finals. And now the final match is set, Will versus Sirius. Will knows that with Bode watching, only a decisive victory will earn him recognition, and with a confident smile, he declares that he will be the one to win. Sirius simply acknowledges his opponent's resolve, his expression unreadable. With a roar, the announcer raises his hand and officially begins the final match. Sirius wastes no time, wind magic already swirling at his feet. He immediately unleashes a massive tornado, sending it hurtling across the arena. The massive vortex of wind tears across the arena, forcing Will to dodge. He digs his heels in, his enhanced body cracking the very ground beneath him. But the sheer force of the attack sends him flying backward anyway. Sirius watches with a cold, unwavering gaze, completely in control. The Prodigy's magic creates a defensive barrier of wind, keeping Will at a distance. Our boy skids to a halt, barely managing to stay on his feet. He realizes with frustration that he can't seem to get close at all. A look of intense focus crosses his face as he analyzes his opponent's power. Sirius returns the look, his own mind calculating his next move. The Prodigy admits that Will's speed is troublesome, but his defense remains absolute. Sirius then unleashes a different kind of attack, a concentrated blast of wind that shoots straight for Will. Unlike the tornado, this focused gale is designed to push him out of the ring. Will grits his teeth, realizing he's about to be forced out of bounds. He decides it's time to use a technique he's been saving. He touches the ground, and a small sapling sprouts from the stone floor. In an instant, it grows into a massive tree, blocking the wind completely. Erica can only watch in awe, wondering if this too is a form of healing magic. The tree stands as a testament to how much stronger Will has become. With his footing secured, our boy looks on with renewed confidence. He turns to his mentor, asking for her thoughts on his new technique. A single leaf drifts down from the massive tree. As Veronica looks up, a bit stunned by the display, he explains that he simply infused the plant with life energy to accelerate its growth. He was inspired by plant-based offensive magic and realized his healing could achieve a similar effect. But his triumphant explanation is cut short as his body suddenly gives out. He stumbles forward and Veronica has to catch him before he hits the ground. She asks if he's all right, and he realizes this must be what mana exhaustion feels like. He laughs it off, admitting the textbook didn't mention just how much power the spell required. But Veronica's expression is serious, confirming a suspicion she's had all along. She explains that healing magic is inherently less efficient than offensive magic, as destroying is far easier than creating. Will understands he must use this new power sparingly, a trump card for the right moment. Back in the present, he gets to his feet, vowing to overcome this handicap just like he's overcome everything else. But Sirius is already preparing his next assault, his expression as cold as ever. He unleashes a volley of wind blades that tear through Will's massive tree. Will can only look on, realizing his opponent's arsenal is far from empty. With a tornado, a gale, and now razor-sharp blades, the Prodigy's magic has no openings. Will stares down his opponent, acknowledging the sheer power of a top-tier candidate, but he clenches his fist, determined to win with the very magic he's created. And with a burst of speed, he charges forward once more. Sirius declares that his defense is absolute, and will never reach him. And once again, our boy is sent flying back by the sheer force of the wind. The Prodigy watches with a cold, unwavering gaze, completely in control. But his confidence shatters as a sharp root suddenly erupts from the ground, piercing his shoulder. He looks down in shock, wondering what just happened. Will explains that while the tornado protects the air, it can't stop the roots growing underground. Sirius grits his teeth, clutching the wound as his perfect defense is finally broken. Will then asks why he cares so much about Professor Bode, noting they seem completely incompatible. The supervisor in question simply watches from the stands with his arms crossed. Sirius simply states that Bode is strong and teaches him, but Will argues that a prodigy like him has better options. Sirius explains that in his family, magical ability is the only thing that matters. It's a ruthless world where everyone is an enemy, all vying to become the next head. That's why following a powerful teacher like Bode is his only path to getting stronger. But he cuts the story short, complaining that his shoulder still hurts from Will's attack. Erica and the other students can only watch, stunned by the sudden turn of events. But Will looks up with a confident smile, ready to unleash a new power of his own. He summons a massive, ethereal dragon made of pure blue energy. The beast roars, ready to settle this fight once and for all. Will reflects that while others took it easy, he's been fighting without any natural talent for this. And with his eyes shadowed by determination, he prepares to prove them all wrong. Will looks on with a smile, now genuinely wanting to defeat his rival. Sirius questions his sudden declaration, but Will just plays it off as talking to himself. He then slams his hand down, unleashing his most powerful seed yet. Massive roots erupt from the ground, twisting with incredible speed. They grow into a colossal tree that fills the entire arena. He calls forth the legendary world tree, Yggdrasil, a testament to his power. He knows that forcing such rapid growth drains an immense amount of magic. And as the tree grows, his ethereal dragon launches its own assault. The beast of pure energy streaks across the battlefield, coiling through the air as it prepares to strike down his opponent. But Sirius simply closes his eyes, seemingly unfazed by the wound on his shoulder. He looks up just as Will launches the entire massive tree straight at him. The colossal plant soars through the air, a makeshift missile of incredible size. The prodigy's eyes snap open, now glowing with a fierce, determined light. But the tree crashes down, pinning him as the ethereal dragon coils around its trunk. Will explains that the plant's vitality is so high, even a single branch can become a weapon. A bead of sweat rolls down Sirius's face as he's overwhelmed by the sheer force. The ground shatters under the immense pressure of the combined assault, and the prodigy is left pinned beneath the massive trunk, completely defeated. Will stands over his fallen rival, dagger in hand, the undisputed victor of the match. Pinned and defeated, Sirius can only admit that he has lost. Will stands over him, the undisputed winner of the final match. The crowd can only stare in disbelief, realizing the healer actually won. The prodigy lowers his head, the weight of his first real defeat settling in. Will offers a hand, admitting it was a close fight, but Sirius rejects the praise. Our boy is confused by his reaction, insisting it was a great battle. But a voice from the stands declares his disappointment in the outcome. And a massive blast of purple energy erupts from the supervisor's position, obliterating the massive tree that had pinned the prodigy down. And Bode stands over Sirius, kicking him aside like he's nothing. He lifts the unconscious prodigy with one hand, declaring that since Sirius failed, he'll be retrained. The other students can only watch in shock, thinking this is far too harsh. But Bode turns his rage on the audience, berating them as well. He roars that he can't accept a mere healer taking first place. His words silence the crowd, leaving everyone intimidated and afraid. Will watches him drag Sirius away, wondering if this is going too far. He speaks up, insisting that while he won, Sirius was far from weak. But the supervisor just glares back, his eyes glowing with pure rage. He stomps toward Will, mocking the very idea of a good fight. He roars that on the battlefield, ability is the only thing that matters. In his world, if you lose, you're nothing but trash destined to die. Will glares back, unable to believe how he's treating his own student. He argues that he beat Sirius, proving that his ability is real, healer or not. But Bode's eyes glow with a menacing light as he dismisses that level of strength. He turns his back, dragging the unconscious prodigy away without another word. Will follows, trying to explain that while healers can't fight, they support everyone else. He insists it's a division of roles, and humanity will perish if they don't work together. The supervisor stops, his expression unreadable as he listens to the boy's plea. He places a hand on Will's shoulder, recalling how his own students died to protect the rear guard. He remembers the healers who fled, only to be wiped out by the weakest of monsters. And because of their cowardice, his own battered students had nowhere to turn and died. He roars that those healers couldn't even stand on the battlefield, let alone save anyone. His eyes burn with a deep-seated hatred for what he considers trash. He questions why a prodigy like Sirius should have to suffer for their sake. Will's own painful memories flood his mind, reminding him that in the end, the weak can do nothing. He stands in silence, the weight of both their pasts hanging in the air. But he knows a far more dangerous era is fast approaching, a time when the strong can no longer afford to be selfish. And with a clenched fist, his own resolve hardens once more. Will declares that those with nothing have no choice but to become strong, asking if Bode will finally acknowledge him if he wins. The supervisor can only offer a condescending smirk in response. He orders the announcer to start the match and get the weaklings out of his sight. The announcer protests, but Bode cuts him off, declaring that he makes the rules here. With no other choice, the announcer can only look on with a worried expression. Will's gaze hardens, ready for the fight that's about to begin. The announcer lets out a defeated sigh, forced to go along with the absurd demand. He officially announces a special match, Bode versus Will. The supervisor cracks his knuckles, a menacing glint in his eyes, and gathers a massive ball of purple energy, vowing to show Will his proper place. Will knows his magic is running low, and he's facing his strongest opponent yet. He realizes a direct fight is impossible, gathering his healing magic for a new plan. But Bode lunges forward, unleashing a devastating strike of his own. Will is caught in the blast, the purple energy crackling around him. The attack erupts in a massive explosion of purple lightning. As the smoke clears, a massive crater is all that remains where Will once stood. Bode stands confidently, ready to explain the 3 reasons his victory is absolute. He boasts of his advantageous distance, his overwhelming speed, and his power to end it in one strike. He mocks his fallen opponent, asking if he can even hear him anymore. But his eyes widen in shock, wondering where that one-strike power has gone. Because Will is still kneeling, having taken the full force of the blast with a dagger. He knew all about Bode's unique lightning magic, and that to survive, he had to avoid a direct hit to his vital organs. Even his advanced healing couldn't save him from a strike to the heart or brain. So he created a blood circuit to conduct the electricity, channeling the blast through his arm and leg to disperse it safely into the ground. With the damage minimized, he gathers his power for a counterattack. But Bode simply scoffs, unimpressed by the boy's desperate effort to survive. Will tries to activate his physical enhancement, ready to charge forward. But his body suddenly seizes up, his power failing him completely. He realizes with dawning horror that he can't properly move his body. Bode explains that anyone hit by his purple lightning is instantly paralyzed. The reality of his situation sinks in, leaving him completely defenseless. The supervisor gathers another ball of crackling energy, preparing to end this, and unleashes another devastating blast of purple lightning. Erica can only watch in horror from the stands, helpless to intervene. Will grits his teeth, forced to admit just how powerful this man truly is. He finally understands the source of Bode's arrogance. His magic has no openings, but even paralyzed, his hand twitches with a flicker of defiance. And with a surge of pure will, he declares that he is going to win this fight. He slams his hand down, betting everything on his last seed and his final magic. With a surge of power, he activates his plant manipulation, commanding a massive water treasure tree to grow. The colossal plant erupts from the arena floor, glowing with life energy. He knows this tree absorbs massive amounts of water, hoping it will disperse the lightning. But Bode just scoffs, unimpressed by the boy's desperate defense. Will looks up in horror, realizing his plan might not be enough. The other students can only watch, completely stunned by the display. Because Bode's lightning tears straight through the massive tree, splitting it in two. And as the charred husks fall, Will can only kneel in disbelief. Bode scoffs at the charred remains, mocking Will's pathetic final trick. But his taunt is cut short as something strange catches his eye. From the scorched earth, dozens of bright red mushrooms suddenly sprout. The supervisor can only stare in shock, demanding to know what's happening. But Will kneels behind a new wall of mushrooms, his desperate gamble having paid off. He explains that a forest burned by lightning is the perfect growth opportunity for certain spores. And this particular mushroom has another, far more dangerous characteristic. As it releases a cloud of glowing red spores all around the supervisor, he grits his teeth, realizing with dawning horror that his entire body is going numb. And with his opponent paralyzed, Will gathers his power for one final strike. Will lunges forward, his fist glowing with power, ready to end this. But Bode just smirks, his eyes glowing with a renewed confidence. He breaks through the paralysis with his own lightning, landing a devastating blow to Will's chest. The impact sends a shockwave through our boy's body. He collapses to the ground as Bode reminds him of his superiority in close combat. The supervisor explains that by supercharging his own body with electricity, he can simply ignore the paralysis. Will can only look on in despair, realizing that even his trump card wasn't enough. Bode looks down, declaring that this is Will's loss. He raises his fist, ready to deliver the final decisive blow, but a familiar staff blocks the attack as Headmaster Goldgran finally intervenes. But before Bode can land the final blow, another blade blocks his path. He glares at the newcomer, questioning if she's taking things too far. It's Professor Veronica, her eyes glowing with a cold, protective light. Bode roars at her to stay out of it, dismissing her as a mere new hire. Will can only look on in shock, surprised by his mentor's sudden appearance. She declares the match is over, but Bode argues that Will can just heal himself and continue. Veronica counters that his magic is completely spent and he has nothing left to give, but Bode refuses to listen, roaring that the boy just lacks fighting spirit as he unleashes his power. Veronica decides the discussion is over, her own brilliant aura erupting in response. But the headmaster finally steps in, ordering both of his professors to stand down. The two professors face off, their auras crackling with raw power. But the headmaster's voice cuts through the tension, ordering them both to stop. He stands between his two instructors, his authority absolute. He declares that a fight between them here is completely pointless. With a simple gesture, he pushes them both back, ending the confrontation. He then turns to Bode, telling him to stand down. His gaze is firm, leaving no room for argument. The supervisor can only grit his teeth in frustration. He finally relents, though his anger is far from gone. The headmaster then turns to Veronica, apologizing for not explaining the situation sooner. The headmaster can only watch, his expression hidden behind a thoughtful hand. He then officially concludes the selection exam, ordering everyone to leave the arena. As the crowd begins to file out, the tension on the field finally breaks. Will tries to heal his wounds, but his magic is completely spent. He grits his teeth in frustration, hating the massive power gap between him and Bode. But before he can collapse, Professor Veronica scoops him up into her arms. She carries the stunned and flustered boy away from the arena floor. She tells him that he fought well, and that it's finally time for him to rest. Will looks up, the fire of his ambition still burning in his eyes despite the defeat. But he finally relents, accepting her words and the end of the battle. But as Veronica carries him away, Will knows that this level of strength is simply not good enough. The night passes, and the next day, a recovered Will walks the halls of the academy. He reflects on Bode's power, realizing a first-class mage's strength isn't just raw power, but tactical refinement. He remembers the heroes of his past life, and how even they couldn't stop humanity's fall, stealing his resolve to grow even stronger. With a new sense of purpose, he makes his way to the headmaster's office. Headmaster Goldgrand turns to greet him, pleased to see the boy has come. The old man notes his quick recovery, and Will explains that once his magic returns, his wounds heal instantly. The headmaster then confirms that Will has passed the exam, much to our boy's surprise. He adds that Sirius and Erica also passed, a revelation that leaves Erica completely stunned. Will questions the decision, recalling how Bode declared everyone a failure, but the headmaster simply brushes it off as the supervisor's yearly tradition. Will questions the supervisor's yearly tradition, as the headmaster explains it's just Bode's way of pushing students to their limits. A twisted form of teaching, given the dangers of field training, leading Will to conclude the man is just incredibly awkward. But he knows there's more to the man than meets the eye. He remembers that in his past life, Bode was a hero who fought tirelessly on the front lines for humanity's sake. The headmaster then moves on, explaining that Will now form a party with students from other academies. And as an official offensive mage, he'll be taking on real monster subjugation requests. The words trigger a dark memory of the monsters that caused humanity's destruction 5 years in the future. He recalls that monsters were originally just creatures with magical power, and not all of them were inherently hostile. Their attacks were often just a natural part of survival, a competition for resources, and if you understood their nature, they could even become allies. But he knows that in about 2 years, the entire world is going to change. A blood-red moon will appear, its light twisting all monsters into vicious, mindless beasts. They will band together across species, their only goal to slaughter humans for the sake of it. And 2 years after that, the Demon King himself will descend upon the world. Humanity will be pushed to the brink, with entire nations perishing in the flames. The strongest offensive mages and knights, humanity's greatest hope, will be the first to fall. And once the front lines collapse, even the healers in the rear will be hunted down and killed. By the time he died in his past life, humanity was just months away from complete extinction. Will clenches his fist, vowing that he will not let that tragedy repeat itself. He must become stronger than he ever was and gain the power to stop the invasion all on his own. He tells the headmaster he must also discover the cause of the red moon. The old man smiles, recognizing the same determined look in Will's eyes. Will notes the teacher's caution, but the headmaster has one last thing to say. He places a hand on the boy's shoulder, offering some final words of advice. Will listens intently, taking the old man's wisdom to heart. The day of the joint training finally arrives, with carriages waiting to depart. Will stands with Erica and Professor Veronica, ready for the mission ahead. But his attention is drawn to 2 familiar figures approaching from behind. It's the supervisor, Bode, walking alongside the prodigy, Sirius. Will approaches the man, suggesting his harsh methods come from a place of concern. But Bode immediately roars back, denying any such thing. He tells the boy not to get cocky, reminding him that he couldn't even land a single hit. He then turns his back, ordering Will to just focus on the training ahead. But as he walks away, he offers a gruff thank you for treating Sirius's wounds. The prodigy himself steps forward, adding his own words of gratitude. Will notes that his rival is as quiet as ever, but Sirius explains that because of their fight, he's now motivated to become even stronger. He reveals that Bode's teaching is simple. As long as you survive to get revenge, it's not a true loss. Will offers a fist bump, encouraging his new rival to keep pushing forward. And for the first time, a small, knowing smile appears on the prodigy's face, and the 2 rivals share a fist bump, a silent promise of future battles. With a newfound rival to push him, Sirius walks away with a new sense of purpose. Bode tells him that having more strong mages will only help humanity's fight. Meanwhile, Professor Veronica calls out, telling Will it's time for them to depart. He turns with a smile, ready to begin the next phase of his training. Their carriage makes its way through the woods as Veronica begins to explain the mission. She informs them that their first task is a goblin subjugation in Dunkel Forest. Erica nervously asks if their party has already been decided. Veronica confirms that Erica is indeed in their party, much to the girl's quiet terror. Will can only reflect on his unusual team as the carriage finally comes to a stop. Veronica announces that their final party member from Silburn has arrived. Will recalls knowing of the Swordsmanship Academy, but never interacting with them. But before he can even step outside, an enthusiastic voice calls out his name, and a young woman with blonde hair suddenly throws her arms around him. The unexpected embrace leaves both Veronica and Erica completely stunned. Will tries to push her away, admitting he has no idea who she is. She finally lets go, a bit surprised by his confusion. She explains that they never had a chance to properly speak before. She then introduces herself as Marie Goldgrand, the headmaster's granddaughter. The name hits Will like a ton of bricks, a face he never expected to see again. A memory of her illness flashes, and he realizes she remembers him from the day he saved her.